This is my review of Cells at Work, Code Black. Okay, so in this episode, we actually find out how kidney stones are formed and how the kidneys work. That's what this episode is about. And also, it is, this episode kind of does give us a little bit of insight into, well, okay, so this episode is primarily about how the kidneys and kidney stones work. So it explains how kidneys filter toxins out of the body. It also explains that as a byproduct of that, sometimes kidney stones happen. Specifically when you overeat and overdrink and eat like crap. And also this episode just kind of gives a little bit of insight into how much some cells are struggling even when there's nothing that they can do. And in a code black environment, and that's what this episode is about. So it starts off with 2153 and his buddy, revealed to actually be called AA2153. They've gotten used to their job and are even joking around on the job, to the point, case in point, they come across a dirty capillary. 1655 slips and falls in some of the gunk that's there, and then when 2153 goes to help him, 1655 tries to pull him in, and they begin horsing around, and eventually 2153 slips and falls into it as well. At which point they start laughing and realize they're both disgusting, so they head to the kidneys to get themselves cleaned off and get it filtered out. And sure enough, they go directly to the kidneys, which they realize they're nearby, which they remember are nearby. So they just head there, and get themselves cleaned off. And I actually really like the aesthetic of the kidneys. The kidneys are very much designed like an old Japanese temple site bathhouse thing. It is a really cool aesthetic. It looks like an old Japanese city, and I kind of really like the aesthetic of old Japanese cities. So that was immediately made me sit up and go, "Hey, that's kind of cool." It looks like an old Japanese temple, and that is that's just a cool aesthetic for the kidneys to have, because the kidneys kind of just don't, because we don't really, the kidneys are kind of an odd organ. Their main process is to filter out toxins and turn it into urine, which is how people pee. But in any case, they arrive and we are introduced to Glomeruli. There's an elder one who is the kind of the head one, and she also scolds everybody for making idle chit chat when they're trying to work, which, to be fair, they shouldn't be doing on the job, which is fine. And also we meet one of the younger Glomeruli she's basically one of the main characters of this episode. She's important to the plot of the episode. That's her main function. I don't really know if there's any images of her that I can find and pull up. I'm not sure if I can find images of them to find and pull up, but I'll do my best. If not, I'll edit them in. Because the thing about this is about the show is that the wiki just kind of doesn't get updated very often, even though it's supposed to be a popular show. But well. Probably because this is a more mature version of it, and some people aren't a fan of that. But in case they go to get cleaned off, as it turns out, 1655 is a regular at the kidneys by this point, and is kind of struck up an odd friendship with one of the Glomerulis in the kidney, and he gets yelled at for causing them to talk. But in any case, 2153 goes on his business, and he overhears some red blood cells scolding the Glomeruli for not cleaning them off correctly, saying that they have to work a lot more than the Glomeruli do, and that they can't just be standing around like statues. And 2153 motions to say something, but the Glomeruli is taking care of him, the main one. She merely responds that she's used to it, that they're used to it, and that they get a lot of abuse. But because according to Gran, as they refer to her, the very old Glomerulus in the system, as according to Gran, the kidney is a silent organ, and they don't really need to complain all that much. So they just kind of take the abuse and just kind of brush it off, kind of sort of. Even though they do get a lot of abuse according to the young Glomerulus. At which point 2153 decides to thank her on behalf of all the red blood cells, pointing out that he knows she works hard and that she doesn't need to worry and that even though she has to work in silence, he points out that that's not a big deal. He points out that being able to shoulder it and do a lot of hard work should be appreciated in its own right, and he thanks her for that. At which point she decides to repay his kindness by warning him about something that is stuck near about something that's happening near the uterus, and that due to an increase in oxalic acid, which I'm not entirely sure where that comes from or what, but I'm assuming it's associated with heavy eating and drinking. As she points out, there's been a buildup of oxalic acid lately, and that he should be careful. But then she gets yelled at by Gran to go back to work. At which point 2153 and 1655 leave to go back on their delivery routes. But as they're leaving the kidneys, they actually hear a noise coming from the uterer, and 2153, remembering that the Glomerulus said something to him about that, decides to go check and investigate. And then, as it turns out, there's a giant kidney stone stuck in the uterer, and it's slowly ripping its way through the walls and causing the urine to turn red with red blood cells, which are just kind of being sucked in. At which point, 2153 and 1655 make a run for it before it eventually stops. And they realize that if it keeps going, it's going to cause more irreparable damage. And 2153, despite being completely out of his field of expertise with how to actually deal with kidney stones, decides the best idea would be to take the kidney stone and just push it. And obviously this doesn't do anything, and in 6055, despite his best interest, decides to help anyway, even though he knows it's not going to do anything. But then, as it seems like the kidney stone is just is not going to budge and just stick there and cause more irreparable damage. Suddenly, a little hose. I forget what this is called, but it's this little thing with a camera and a laser. It goes up the urethra into the uterer, and it's designed to take out kidney stones. Case in point, it blasts the kidney stone into a million pieces, and it just gets washed away into the urine, and problem solved. So at which point 2153 is greeted by 1196, who remarks that she's back on patrol and is also working to get people to a safer environment. Basically, she's working to escort people out along with the rest of her white blood cell companions, who 2153 doesn't even notice initially. It's only after they say something that he realizes that he needs to actually have a conversation with them, and he tries desperately to make up for the fact that he didn't even notice they were there. Because as we've established, he's kind of head over heels in love with 1196, and sometimes he doesn't pay attention to things when she's in the room. So, yeah. But yeah, she escorts him out of the uterer, and leaves the rest up to the platelets, who are a little bit nervous about doing their job, pointing out that there's the possibility that another kidney stone could rush through the system and cause problems, and that they could be sucked into the urine as well. But the head platelet just merely responds that that's exactly why they need to do their job, and they do it anyway. Basically, that's just how it happens. At which point 2153 remarks that even the platelets are a little bit stressed by the situation, and he just kind of leaves with the white blood cells. At which point they go to the bladder. And then we get information about why that's actually a bad thing. As it turns out, 2153 thinks the coast is all clear because, well, as it turns out, they got rid of the kidney stone, which was the main cause for concern. But 1196 merely remarks the opposite, pointing out that when a bunch of white blood cells, which have currently congregated in the bladder, are all gathered in one place, then it's going to cause problems, irreparable problem, that it could mean problems and trouble. So, and case in point, as it turns out, thanks to the camera, which kind of opened the gateway to the bladder so that I could get through. A bunch of bacterium actually managed to slip through, and when they're not to places they're not normally able to go, and are slowly making their way toward the kidney. And if a kidney gets infected, it can cause problems for the kidney. So obviously that's a bad. I don't specifically know what the consequences of it is called, but basically if a bacterium ever makes it to the kidney can potentially be lost and results in kidney failure. So it's not good, is what I'm saying. It's not pleasant at all. But in case the white blood cells proceed to go to battle and clear out the massive horde of bacterium that have now hoarded into the bladder and are making their way toward the kidney, and 1196 merely remarks that they don't have nearly enough white blood cells to actually do the job, and also remarks that 2153 and 1655 need to get to somewhere safe while they deal with the bacterium. At which point 2153 decides to head back to the kidney. I'm not entirely, so it's clear. So I think again, it's clear that 2153 is kind of taking a bit of a heroic role, which is an interesting role for him to take. But I should point out, as several people, as 1655 has pointed out multiple times up to this point, he is not in any way qualified to protect a kidney or anything else for that matter. He's just kind of sure, his entire role up to this point is doing damage control wherever he can, and just making sure everybody's okay, but he's not really qualified to protect anybody. He's a red blood cell. They're kind of useless in terms of keeping the body safe from invaders, but he does that job anyway because he can. But in any case, 2153 makes his way back to the kidney and tells the glomeruli that they need to evacuate because the kidney could be lost if they're not careful, and that the bacterium are headed this way. And he's not entirely sure if the white blood cells are going to be able to keep them safe. But Gran kind of remarks that regardless of the situation, they need to get back to work because they're the silent kidney, they're the silent organ, and that they don't really need to express their problems, and nobody needs to, and that they can keep working despite the situation. At which point 2153 finally has enough of her overbearing attitude and merely remarks that it's okay for people to complain from time to time, especially if you need help. And while Gran openly remarks that he feels like he's overstepping a bit, the young glomeruli, the young one, she walks up and remarks that the reason they don't complain is because they trust her and respect her, but sometimes they do feel like they just need to cry sometimes, and even when it's actually kind of hard for them. At which point, Gran realizes that she may be a little bit too hard on them sometimes. At which point, a giant bacterium just kind of bursts in through the kidney and tries to get into the kidney, and almost attacks the young glomerulus. But then Gran steps in and gets attacked instead. She shields the young glomerulus with her body, and then kind of bleeds out. At which point 1196 shows up and swiftly defeats the bacterium, but when she finds out the situation, she remarks that she wasn't able to actually hold them off at the bladder, which is what caused the problem at the kidney in the first place. And she realizes this is entirely her fault, and goes back to work to clear them out, to make sure nobody else dies on her watch. At which point Gran has a final tearful farewell with the rest of the glomeruli in the body. And while they remark that they're a little bit sad that she's gone, and that she needs to continue to teach them about how the kidney works and how to actually continue to do their job to the best of their ability, Gran merely remarks that they need to get back to work for her sake, pointing out that even though she's gone, she knows that they'll be able to continue to work the way they've always have, even without their leader. And with that, she passes away. At which point, but at which point that things actually take a bit of a turnaround, because right at that moment an antibiotic shows up and vaporizes all of the, and just vaporize, and specifically one for the kidney and the urinary tract. But an antibiotic shows up and vaporizes all of the, basically just vaporizes all of the bacterium in the urinary tract, and the fight is over and done within like 5 seconds once it shows up. At which point everybody in command actually cheers because they managed to defeat the massive onslaught of bacterium that invaded the body. But the commander, again, we don't really know his name. The commander merely remarks that he feels like they came a little bit too close for comfort, and that if they continue winning these battles by the skin of their teeth, that eventually something bad is going to happen and they're going to have problems. But also, in regards to her grand's final wish, the young Glomerulus, who apparently is now the head one, she asks that, because she notices that 2153 and 1655 are actually kind of disgusting, remarks that they should come back to the kidney to get cleaned up before they go on the route. But they merely respond that they can go another route before they actually get clean again, and that they should take this opportunity to basically take a good cry and get all their feelings out before they go back to work. So, and with that he leaves, and the Glomeruli do exactly that. They all mourn the death of Gran, and then they go back to work. And 1655 merely remarks that was probably the coolest thing he ever did, but that was the coolest thing 2153 ever did. But and 2153 merely remarks he wasn't trying to be cool. But as they go back to work, 2153 merely reflects that even in this cold black environment, he remarks that yes, there are some times where people do cry out for help, but even then, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you fight, there's nothing you can really do in some situations, and then you just kind of have to grit and bear it. And that's really what the takeaway from this episode was. That not everybody can come out, can give out help and get out of a bad situation, but some shoulder it better than others. But for the most part, people just kind of, it's specifically about Cells at Work in this case, but specifically there are people who just kind of struggle a little bit, but some of them just kind of shoulder their problems a lot better than others. So it's kind of like a balancing act. You do need to let people know that you need help, but sometimes it's on other people to find out that they need help, that they actually are struggling and need help, and lend a hand. So that's what the takeaway from this episode was. Yes, it's specifically about kidneys and kidney stones and all that, but that was what this episode is. It's about people who sometimes aren't able to cry out for help and don't whine or complain, but sometimes you need to be able to read the signs and notice that somebody is struggling and actually lend a hand. So that's kind of an interesting little take for Cells at Work Code Black to actually take. It's interesting, but we also get a glimpse of what the next episode is going to be, which is about caffeine. So that's going to be interesting to see because mainly what we see is two red blood cells going through the corridors, and they're being sprayed by the sprinklers. But instead of getting a little bit slower and sluggish like we know with alcohol, they actually start feeling a bit of an adrenaline rush. So, which implies caffeine. So we're going to be getting into that in the next episode. But in any case, that's my review of Cells at Work Code Black. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter in the description below. And also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks, and I'm always saying thanks, so be sure to check those out in the description below as well. Also, if you want to see more videos from me, then be sure to check out the sidebar in the wherever you're watching this. Either on if it's on desktop, it'll probably be off to the side of the video. If it's on mobile, it'll be under the video. And also, you can find videos recommended by myself in the end screen. The top one is the one that's most recent. The bottom one is the one that's most recommended for you. So be sure to check those out in the end screen. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. So next time I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.